At this point, I'm going to ask Officer Frith to explain to you his arrival, what he encountered, what he saw, and what he did. I want to remind you that the police department's making an exception to our policy. Officers involved in critical incidents are not subjected to media interaction or involvement while the investigation is taking place. We're going to make an exception today, but questions, if any, will be very limited. And the same goes for Sergeant Swoner. Officer Frith.
Good morning. Yesterday, I was working in the area of the Hickory Hollow Mall. Around 1:13, I heard over our radio that Officer Ernest was flagged down by the citizens, stating that there was an armed suspect in the theater. I was in close proximity with another officer, and we immediately responded. Myself and 3 other officers responded. We all arrived pretty much at the exact same time. At that point, I noticed there was two citizens that were possibly wounded. Immediately called for an ambulance, and knowing that and gaining the information that the suspect was still inside, immediately proceeded into the theater to actively engage him. We were directed to the theater where he was at, which was Theater 4. I directed 2 officers to hold security on those 2 doors on the outside of there, and myself and another officer went upstairs into the projection booth where we attempted to visually clear the theater as much as we could. We were unable to identify any civilians or suspects from that vantage point. At that point, we went back down to the entrance of the theater, and just by pure chance, I went to the left, and immediately upon entering the theater, I was engaged with what I perceived to be small arms fire from a small caliber handgun. To my right, I heard 3 audible pops from what I can recall, and I felt what felt like a discharge from a weapon. The pressure hit me on the right side of my face. At that point, I turned to my right and immediately engaged the silhouette of a figure, because as Mr. Aaron stated, the movie was still playing, and all I could see was the silhouette of a figure. I engaged that figure with 1 shot with my patrol rifle, and immediately backed out and declared that we had a barricaded suspect situation, and waited for the extra officers to come, and Sergeant Swoner take it from there.
I had worked the accident just down the street and had just left that scene when I heard Officer Ernest call for a man with a hatchet and a gun at the theater. So I started back en route. When I arrived, within minutes, I encountered the 2 females and a male, the same victims that Officer Frith had encountered on the front sidewalk. The females were covered in a dye that covered their shirts down. It was a red-colored dye, and that's common in some sprays. And the male told me he had been hit with a hatchet, and I said, where? And he showed me the gash. From that point, within seconds of talking to them, I heard a gunshot inside. I knew they were inside clearing the building. I moved to the front door and could see them up a hallway. Moved into the front door and encountered Officer Frith with this patrol rifle covering a doorway. And I had asked him what happened. He said, the guy came to the door, he pointed a pistol at me and pulled the trigger. He said, I stepped back and shot. I asked Officer Frith, did you hit him? He said, I don't know, I shot center mass. From that point, I directed them into a hallway of cover, other officers into a hallway of cover. Other officers were arriving. We didn't know whether there were still folks in other theaters, so we took up positions to cover down both sides of the hallway. Tactically cleared that, made it safe, went into the theaters. Actually, 2 people had come out and tried to get out, and we held them in place until we made it safe. Then we pulled them out and took them out under the cover of officers. When we had that secured, we held what we had and checked on an ETA from our SRT or SWAT team. When SWAT arrived, they immediately came in with their patrol rifles, and the decision was made to enter the theater. This theater is set up, I don't know if you've given them maps or what have you, but the theater is set up with doors that face each other, that open out. A brief plan was made to use a flashbang when they entered that, so that was relayed down to all the officers in the hallway. When they opened that door, the flashbang was deployed, and the SWAT officer behind the rightmost outer seats, rear seats, and took up a position there. Within seconds, they encountered the subject at the far end of the theater, and shots were fired. There were, I'd be afraid to say how many shots were fired, but several. There were two or three SWAT officers behind the seats and one standing. What we also encountered was tear gas that was so dense that he had put into the air, I guess, with the canisters, and it made it nearly impossible to breathe. When you encountered it, was real heavy too. When that happened, I had taken up a position in the doorway where I could see what was going on with SWAT, and I could see my officers in the hallway. We immediately radioed for gas masks, because all the patrol officers have gas masks, to bring us some masks. We didn't realize it was going to be that heavy. When they brought us masks, I saw the officer coming with masks, ran to him, got him, brought him back to the SWAT officers who were still in the theater, engaged with the suspect. And when I say engaged, there were multiple engagements. There was one, stop, see what he's doing. He shoots at him some more, and he engages him again. I don't know, you may be able to tell me how many times that occurred, but gave the gas mask to the SWAT members. They suited up with those and were better equipped then to deal with the problem. From that point, that continued. I backed out and watched the outer perimeter until the suspect exited out the door where the officers on the outside dealt with the threat.
Guys, thank you. It's important to note that during Montano's interaction with the SWAT team members, he had multiple and continuous opportunities to end the situation. He chose not to. He chose to continue to engage our officers, ultimately coming out with his hand up under the backpack, the hatchet in another hand, and the officers believing they were in imminent danger, and they fired on him on the outside of the building, resulting in his death.